Welcome back to Lo-Fi and Theorize, the place where we accept pretty much any FNAF theory you can think of. So today I just want to talk quickly about potential security breach timeline as far as when the actual events of security breach take place. And I just have a couple pieces that I want to show you. First of all, the first thing I found was from the Bonnie Bowl area. There's a walkie-talkie that shows the year 2019 on July 4th. For a few years, I just assumed that this was an asset or just like a texture for the game or whatever that they used on all the walkie-talkies, because it is the same on all the walkie-talkies, and the time doesn't change throughout the night either. I tried that. But the reason that I still think it might be significant is because of this calendar that we see in one of the employee rooms, essentially. It's like a bunch of computers and whatnot. And then the calendar on the wall, it has the same date circled. The reason that's more important to me is because that is clearly made, but like Steel Wool actually made this. So even if the walkie-talkie info was just like an asset for the game, this is not. This was clearly made by Steel Wool. And so while I don't necessarily believe this, I do think it's interesting to connect the two pieces together. But then you have to have a whole nother argument, which shows here that July 4th is on a Wednesday. If we look at a real life calendar, the dates don't actually match up for 2019, because in 2019, July 4th was on a Thursday, and here the calendar seems to be showing a Wednesday. Unless you make the argument that the calendar for each month, it starts with a Monday, but that doesn't really line up very well, at least in the US. So that kind of contradicts it, but if we're not working with an IRL calendar timeline, then it wouldn't matter. The important thing would just be that this date is circled. But you could also just argue that this date is circled because it's a holiday and it has nothing to do with the actual date, the events going on this particular date. Like, that could just be random. But the fact that it has the walkie-talkies also having that date made it a little more significant to me. But then we run into one huge other problem that I just realized. So I went into Security Breach Ruin and I went and looked at the walkie-talkies, and it still has the exact date. So unless Ruin happens on the same day as Security Breach, then we have a whole other issue. So if you go by that logic, then Ruin happens almost immediately after Security Breach, like literally the same day. But I don't think that's the case. You could make an argument there. I'm not throwing it out, at least. But maybe the devs just forgot about the texture, or else the texture was never important to start with. But I think the calendar is possibly important, but it could just be another one of those YouTuber baits that Steel Wool talked about with FNAF. So I don't want to give it too much credit, but I do think it's relevant at least to look at that. It does say 2019, and while that's significant, what's more significant is that it's July 4th on the calendar and on the walkie-talkie. But that's kind of all I wanted to say about that. I just thought it was interesting and would love to hear people's discussions, because I don't think a lot of people have this viewpoint that 2019 might be the year Security Breach happens. Because you also have to keep in mind, Five Nights at Freddy's 3 states that 30 years after Freddy Fazbear's Pizza closed its doors, the events that took place there have become nothing more than a rumor and a childhood memory. So 30 years after Freddy Fazbear's Pizza closed its doors, the question is, which Freddy Fazbear's Pizza are we talking about? Because that changes the timeline depending on which Freddy Fazbear's you accept as the one that's being specified in this game. And there's so many other factors that go into a FNAF timeline, so I'm not trying to like say this is the timeline because of one little detail in Security Breach, because Security Breach is all over the place. But I do want to bring it up because I think it's fun to think about and discuss. So that's all we got. Talk to you later.